Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting preview for this week's Rocket Mortgage Classic. Gonna get you guys ready for all of your exposure. But first off, I'll look at my modeling and key stats, what I'm looking for to identify my top plays, and then afterwards we're gonna go through some of my exposure, both from the fantasy and the betting side of things. But first off, my DFS core plays and value plays, as well as a few outright and placement bets that I've already added to the mix. So by the end, you'll have a good idea of how to get your research started, and a few ideas of plays that I've gone to that you might want to add to the mix yourself. So let's go ahead, not waste any time at all, and get it started with first off a look at the modeling and my key stats of the week. I do have a full course breakdown already up on the channel, and I'll put a link to that in the description of the video, but this is another birdie fest like the Travelers, and probably even more so because of the par 72 setup. We've had scores of -20 to even -26 win this thing before, and with a little bit of rain and a relatively calm forecast projected, it looks like it's going to be another low scoring week. So just like last week, birdie or better percentage is towards the top end of the modeling. In fact, the number 2 key stat at this event. Number 1, though, is still shots gained approach. And if we're going to look at any specific proximity buckets with the approach play, I think looking at the 50 to 150 range would be the best. And if we take a look at the approach distribution, there's a lot of extra shots that come in that range. So that's where a little bit of extra emphasis is going to be. Number 3 would be shots gained off the tee. It is a balanced golf course, I would say, but driving distance has proven to be extremely valuable on some of the par 5s. I'm looking at putting form, also bent POA stats, as that is the type of agronomy that we have this week. And at the par 72 setup, par 5 scoring, not a bad idea as well. And with your comp courses, it's a lot of the more birdie fest, bent grass setups that we have on the PGA Tour. So that's the case with all 3 of these golf courses. You put it all together, we're looking for somebody with some birdie or better firepower, but also somebody that has finesse with the wedges to add on top of that. And we've seen that with some of the past champions, of course, top 5, top 10 finishers around this golf course as well. It can help us find some of our top plays of the week. So if you guys haven't already joined Bet the Number, a great way to plug in a lot of these key stats and make a model over there. Make sure to check them out as well. We've got 6 plays to go through this week, and our first one's going to be Patrick Cantlay up top, and I got him at plus 1650 for an outright. It's going to cost you $10,200 if you plug him into a Draftkings lineup, and really has all the momentum heading his way. If we take a look at the last 24 rounds, you'll see that he's one of the best players up top with shots gained ball striking, gaining over a stroke per round, combining his off the tee and approach, which is exactly what we're looking for from an elite tier player. And it's been the putter lately that's let him down a bit, and it's not like he's been horrendous on the greens. He's been about a neutral if you take a look at the last 12 or 24 round sample size, but on bent grass POA for his career, that's the kind of surface that we have around this golf course. It's been one of his better surfaces comparatively, so I would say that there's a decent chance that you get a bounce back here. And his only ever start around this golf course, he ended up with a T2 finish in 2022, so wasn't able to punch the outright ticket then, but as close as he could possibly get without doing so. And in a field that's a little bit weaker, this is the kind of spot where we could see him get that breakthrough victory. It's been a long time since he's gone into that winner's circle, but 4 players in the field, he's one of the best winners that we have. I mean, Hideki's up there. Colin back in the day used to win a whole bunch of golf tournaments, and then there's a whole bunch of losers that won maybe once or twice in this entire field. So I think if there's a spot for him to break through, the form's been there. It's been in some elite tier fields as well, where he's been posting those kind of ball striking stats. So you can see towards the right, he's number 14 in the total mono ranking, so perhaps that makes him a little bit lower owned than some of the other players towards the top, because Ben Griffin's got the best form of anybody. You got Keegan coming in off a win, also pretty good course fit for himself. I could see Patrick Cantlay being like 15-16% owned, which would be about the average ownership for somebody towards the top end of the board, which in my opinion would make him a pretty good DFS play as well. So from the outright perspective, we don't have to worry about that kind of steamer ownership, of course. I think he's just a really good play in a vacuum at this sort of event. But if we get him at average ownership as well, and I think he could be especially useful from that perspective too. So it'll be our first core play that we're taking this week. And even if he is getting a little bit of ownership, I'll still be using him. That's kind of the idea with these core plays, is that I'll use them regardless of the ownership that they'll come in at. However, I would say if you're somebody watching this, maybe not quite as sold on a Patrick Cantlay, and you're deciding whether to play him on a Wednesday, it comes down to the ownership in most cases. If he's going to be average to below average ownership, I I'd say that he's a good play on paper to pretty much everyone out there. However, if he's getting a little bit more steam than I'm expecting as of right now, then maybe it's closer to a 50-50 prospect. So we'll have to see what happens with that Cantlay ownership throughout the week, but I'm cautiously optimistic that it's going to stay at least a little bit lower than it should be. Next up, we got Cameron Young at $9,300, so he'll be our second core play of the week, and I'm taking him for an outright at plus 2750. So it was a 25-1 boosted 10% on Hard Rock Bet, which was the best number that I could find. I know he's 28-1 on a few other books, so if you can get that number, of course, take advantage of that. But Cam Young is another player that is trending in the right direction. If we take a look at the last 24 measured rounds, he's got shots gained into the positive in 3 of the 4 categories. Ball striking's been decent, gaining close to 0.4 strokes per round. Putter, though, which was a huge problem for all of 2024 and partially in 2023, has now become a massive positive for Cam Young. In fact, he's one of the best putters that we have in the field. And if we go to the last 12 measured rounds, all of that holds up. In fact, the putter gets even more significantly into the positive. Shots gained ball striking, though, about 0.3 strokes per round, so still very respectable in those 2 categories. And he has a good track record around this course. So if we take a look at his 2 starts around Detroit Golf Club, he had a T6 last year, a T2 finish back there with Cantlay in 2022. So somebody that's already gotten experience around this sort of a venue, and has also found success in that limited sample size as well. So I would say that for Cam Young, he's a better DFS play than outright bets. There's always that mental factor, and when he was in contention at the RBC Canadian Open, you saw what happened to him on that 72nd hole. So for DFS, where a top 5, a top 10 would probably still get there as an optimal play, I think he's an even better option on a week like this. But the unfortunate part about it is that we're not going to be the only ones that see this potential in Cam Young. He's got that elite course history, some of the best form that we've seen from him in the last year, even 2 years on the PGA Tour. So I would expect him, unlike a Patrick Cantlay, to probably be one of the more popular players in this range. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if Cameron Young was getting closer to that 20% mark, but because he is trending in so well, he's somebody that on a Monday I want to use as a conviction play, then I'm going to be okay with that. And I think that's a good way to handle some of these players that are likely to be chalk, is if there's a handful of them, maybe 2 to 3 on a Monday that you're okay using at that sort of ownership, then I'm okay having some conviction on a player, still using them in 35-40% of lineups, and try and get 2x leverage to a guy that might be 20% owned, but do that on a Monday. Know ahead of time, like, hey, if this guy's chalk, I'm going to use him anyways. If you get to Wednesday and you're looking at trying to add a few guys to your player pool on top of, your core plays that you already have down, don't make them the 20%ers that you're adding on a Wednesday. So, for example, if you're not completely sold on a Cam Young at a golf tournament like this, then you probably shouldn't be using them as one of the more popular players. I, of course, like to give you guys some perspective into where I'm using conviction plays, into where I'm still using players that might be a little bit chalky, but that doesn't mean that it's going to end up the right decision. That's just my process, what I'm choosing to do on a week like this. So tread with caution, I'd say, on players that are a little bit chalkier like this. Unfortunately, or I guess fortunately for myself, I'll still be using them in some lineups, and we'll have to see if it pays off at that sort of number. Next core play is going to be Wyndham Clark at $8,600, who I don't think is going to be nearly as popular as a Cameron Young. So if we've got to get a little bit different towards the top, Cantlay about average ownership. Wyndham Clark, though, I'd expect to be about averagely owned, if not even slightly below the average ownership. And the only reason I don't know this for certain at this point is that the 8K range is kind of crappy on a week like this. If we had players around him that I knew were going to be chalky, then I'd be comfortable saying that Wyndham Clark would be below the average ownership. But Min Woo Lee, he's got terrible form. Ricky Fowler, Keith Mitchell aren't really impressing either. Same thing with Tony Finau. There's no one other than, I guess, Akshay. And even he's not even playing that well at $8,200. That's going to be drawing away all of those eyes. But if Wyndham Clark is about 10, maybe 12% owned on a week like this, there's a ton of upside on him. And the main reason for that is how he hit the irons last week. If you take a look at the last 12 measured rounds, it's not really going to reflect that because the 2 events before last week were not as positive for Windy C, but he's a player last week that gained 0.7 strokes approach per round, which compared to his last month or two is a vast improvement, because you can see before that point he was losing like 0.7, 0.8 strokes per round with his approach play. And it's a massive but, and the same thing happened to Sam Burns 3 or 4 weeks ago, when these guys that are really good off the tee players, really good putters, find something with their irons and they can continue that for a few events, they can win golf tournaments. And that was the idea with us betting Sam Burns at the Canadian Open. It didn't work out. He lost in the playoff. That was a little bit heartbreaking. Week after that, he nearly won the damn US Open. So there was clearly something going on there. I'm not saying that that's going to 100% happen with Wyndham Clark, but I look for these high upside kind of stat profiles like you have with the Clark or Burns, who, by the way, they're one of the top birdie makers on tour, both of them, top 20 in the category because of that kind of skill set. But when they clean up the iron play and they don't miss nearly as many greens as what they're used to, they can win golf tournaments in a whim's notice, like out of nowhere, just 1 week of form showing and then go out there the next week and get the job done. And at a course that is wide open off the tee like we have at Detroit Golf Club, that is massive for Wyndham Clark as well. And he doesn't have a massive sample size around here. 2 starts over the last 5 years. One was a withdrawal, which isn't great, but he does have a T8 finish back in 2022. So, a lot of these players we've taken so far don't have a massive course history, but all of them have shown us semblance of form, have, had flashes of a top 10 finish at this golf course, which I think is important on a week like this. There's going to be a lot of rookies, people that haven't played here before. Give me guys with upside that have shown it around Detroit Golf Club. Before we go through the 3 value plays, just want to remind you where you guys can get access to these spreadsheets. That, of course, would be on my Patreon page, which you can find in the description of this video. My Patreon page, the DFS tier specifically, is only $15 a month. It gives you access not only to all the main slate sheets that you see in this kind of video here, but also all the showdown stuff I do for rounds 2 through 4. And not only do you guys get my entire player pool, every single bet that I get to on any given tournament week, but also all the research tools that you need for your own process. That includes recent form metrics, event history, shots gained metrics over the last 24 and last 12 rounds, as well as all the model weightings that are censored on the right side over here. Of course, all of that stuff that is blacked out won't be if you're a part of the Patreon page over there. And on top of this, it all updates for rounds 2 through 4. So for Showdown, you have ownership projections and a player pool that's specifically catered for that for every single tournament on the PGA Tour schedule. So check that out if you guys haven't already. Also help support the channel and all the content that we're doing here, and it will vastly help improve your process. So I'd highly recommend checking it out from that perspective too. Our first value play is going to be Stephan Jaeger at $7,700, who I'm not betting outright, but I did take for a top 10 at plus 650. Just couldn't get odds that I thought were good enough on Hard Rock Bet, even with a boost, so I'm staying away from it. But a player that at this golf course has been a top 10 machine. Last time out, was not able to do it, did miss the cut around this venue, but it had a T9 finish, also a top 5 finish in 2022. So 2 of the 3 times he's played here, he's gotten the job done, and it makes sense given the kind of skill set that plays here. You want somebody that's long off the tee if you can. Also a good short iron player, which from 150 yards and in, Jaeger might not be elite in those categories, but he's at the very least above average. And on these bent POA surfaces, maybe not for his career on the surface, but at this specific golf course, has made his fair share of putts. And, anytime we get a player that's a PGA Tour winner at $7,700, who, well, maybe isn't in the best form lately, but that is going to keep the ownership a little bit lower, and I'll take a bounce back spot on him, especially when at the Travelers, he played a lot better than I expected him to. And it's not like he ended up having a top 10 finish, but his T34 was sneaky, given that the ball striking was better than you probably would have thought. And if we take a look at the last 12 measured rounds, which haven't been great for Stephan Jaeger, he is at least gaining in the 2 most important categories. That would be your shots gained approach, also your shots gained putting, and usually off the tee is one of his main strengths. But at golf courses with some trouble off the tee, he's gotten into some of that trouble a little bit more than he'd like. But this golf course is almost completely wide open. There's only 1 hole with water in play, and it's on your second shot, not off the tee. There are some tree-lined fairways, but they're not the worst if you end up getting into them. Those are the golf courses. Memorial Park Golf Club, by the way, Houston Open that he won at before too. Similar type of style of golf course where he could find a lot of success. So you're going to see me using him in quite a bit of my lineups this week. And from the game theory perspective, he could be lower owned than the average player here just because of that form not being nearly as strong as some of the other guys around him. There's a good chance that he gets overlooked, which in my opinion would be a little bit of a mistake. Next up, we've got Aldrich Potgieter at $7,000, so going way cheaper down the board, and I took for a top 5 at plus 2250. And the last time we saw Potgieter was back at the Charles Schwab Challenge, so quite a bit of time in between starts. Was not into the US Open, also not into the his signature events, so you're not going to see him playing at the US Open Travelers or even the RBC Canadian Open. I don't believe he was qualified to play for that event. That's maybe the one downside, is that we haven't seen him for a while, but a T6 finish at that golf course was way unexpected. I mean, that is a positional course where it's all about keeping the ball in play. Potgieter's biggest asset would be his driving distance, but he did it with the irons. He gained a bunch of strokes there. He had a solid putter. He's a really, really good putter. No sample size on bent POA, but in terms of his putting stats for this year, he's gaining like a half a stroke putting per round. And now we get him at a course where he can spray that driver all he wants to. I mean, there are adjacent fairways that he could even hit into if he needs to. And the par fives are going to be, and even some par fours that could be potentially drivable, are well within his wheelhouse when he carries it 350 yards. So the top five, I think, is a good market to attack him on, and especially for DFS too, because he's proven to this point of the year that he's boom or bust. He misses a lot of cuts. In fact, before that top six finish, he missed like 7 cuts in a row. So that is extremely evident with Potgieter. But in DFS or a top 5, where all we care about is that top level ceiling, like if you're using him in DFS, you're using him in GPP labs, right? You're not using him in like a single entry or anything that you want to have any sort of a safe play in. Our last play, by the way. If you think this is an ugly play, just wait till the last one. It's throw up in your mouth sort of play, but it's perfect for large field GPPs because when he hits, he ends up hitting in a big way. So that's why I love him in these sort of formats, and whether it's DFS or from the outright betting perspective. And the outright number just wasn't good enough, especially compared to some of the other sports books out there. But with me boosting this a little bit to plus 2250, the top 5 odds were pretty decent, and I went out there and mixed it in myself. So the form, by the way, other than that Charles Schwab Challenge, hasn't been that great for Potgieter with a lot of those missed cuts, but the ball striking's been fine. It's mostly been around the green play that's gotten him a bit, and this is a golf course where the around the green play is some of the simplest that you have on all the PGA Tour. I mean, guys like Cam Davis that routinely lose a whole bunch of strokes around the green have had a lot of success around this kind of venue, so why not a Potgieter? And it's been a spot where some people have won for the first time, like Nate Lashley's probably going to win for his first and only time around this kind of golf course. It could be a breakout spot for somebody like Potgieter too, so I like that kind of narrative-based stuff as well. And then for the last play, which this one might get me into some trouble, it's Nick Dunlap at $6,300, and I've seen enough people shitting on him that I know he's probably going to be sub 1% owned. In fact, I know a lot of people watching this aren't going to use him himself, which I'm totally fine with, because for him to be a good play this week, he's going to have to be unowned, right? There's a reason why no one's using him, and I would say that if there's a golf course for him to finally figure this thing out, it is a Rocket Mortgage Classic, one that is wide open, where you have a lot of room to work with. Even if you hit the ball in line, there's no water to hit into, not a lot of out of bounds outside of the first few holes. And, you know, if he hits the ball into the trees, he's still going to have a chance for a recovery shot, which he is very skilled at. He's somebody that can move the ball in both directions. And what I will say about Dunlap is the last 2 rounds at the Travelers, there was no cut there, which was great because the first few rounds, he shot himself way out of the golf tournament. I mean, round 2 in particular was horrendous for Dunlap. But the last 2 days, his driving was not nearly as bad as what the stats would indicate. There was 1, maybe 2 drives where he really lost all of those strokes to the field. In the last round, he hit 10 plus fairways. He was hitting the ball a lot more accurate than what you'd expect. A lot of his quote unquote misses were like in intermediates or just 1 to 2 yards off of the fairway. And I truly think, at least based on what I saw there, and I went through all the shots the last few rounds, I truly had to deep dive them before I would even consider sniffing throwing him on the channel as a potential play, because he looked better. He really did. And if you take a look at the shots gained metrics for Nick Dunlap, the off the tee play has still been into the negative a lot more than we'd like. I mean, even last event, he lost like a stroke per round, a little bit over a stroke per round. But if you look at the 3 to 4 starts before that, it's been a lot less shitty for Dunlap. He's still losing strokes to the field with the shots gained off the tee, but it hasn't been nearly as horrendous as what it was before. And like I said, if there's a golf course where you can kind of spray it a bit, it is around here. The other parts of his game, though, really have not been that bad. And that's why I think when Dunlap gets this thing figured out off the tee or gets to a golf course that could make sense, he has that bounce back potential in him, and he's given up a few times. That's why he's still losing in those categories. But like even the last 24 measured rounds, if we zoom out, and he's had some just horrendous starts over this stretch. I mean, it's hard to understate how bad the form is here and why it's such a disgusting play. But you can see he's been about a neutral in those 3 categories. So the off the tee play has been that kryptonite for him. we've seen crazier things happen. So I bet him at 500 to 1. I don't think that is very advisable. I even put LOL next to it just because I know it's probably not going to happen. But a top 20 at plus 1650, I think that is a little bit more realistic. So he's going to be that super low owned option towards the very bottom end of the board that I'm taking. And, I don't expect a lot of people to play Dunlap in their lineups. This is more meant for perspective, I'd say, on Nick Dunlap. But if I'm going to take a shot on a player towards the bottom, and this is what I want you guys to take away from this, because it's really the whole reasoning behind even potentially getting to a Nick Dunlap play is you want somebody with upside, kind of like Jaeger, kind of like we've had with a lot of plays that we've gone through here. When they play well, like Potgieter is another great example of that. They top 5, they top 10. Dunlap has shown that to us. He's won twice over the last calendar year. He's had a lot of top 5, top 10 finishes over that last year as well. Now, last 3-4 months, it's been like non-existent. He hasn't had a single one of those, but he is that sort of player that when he snaps out of and he has a good week, you want to have him for those high upside sort of finishes. You don't, and like the top 20 bet is something I mixed in that plus 1650, but that's why I bet him outright too, is because if he does figure out the driver, God forbid he gains strokes off the tee or something like that, he could win this kind of golf tournament. He's shown it to us over the last year already. So I'd much rather take somebody here that has some upside than what I think a lot of people are doing towards the bottom end of the board. And they just look for guys that are going to make the cut, because that's not going to cut it. If you get somebody that makes the cut down here, they're going to be plenty, probably like 20-30 guys towards the bottom that make the cut from the 6K range. It's not about just making the weekend. There's going to be plenty that pull that off. It's getting the guys that can make 25 birdies, which you need to have at a golf course like this to get close to 100 fantasy points. And Dunlap has the kind of skill set to do so. A really skilled putter. You can see on the bent post surface a slight gainer for his career. Only the ever so slightest gainer though, gaining 0.01 strokes per round. But compared to that baseline lately, that's about 0.3 strokes better per round than that 24 round baseline. So perhaps a little bit of positive momentum there. And yeah, he's my slapdick this week. I wouldn't expect a lot of you to play him. In fact, I hope a lot of you don't, so that we can keep the ownership below that 1% mark. But if you've got some loser down towards the bottom that you think has a fighting chance to get the job done, don't be shy about mixing them in, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the DFS and betting preview. Go ahead, smash that like button if you guys haven't already, and also subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. We'll have our round 1 prop stream that'll be at 8 p.m. here on this YouTube channel. The DFS live stream, that's going to be on the Ship It Nation YouTube channel on Wednesday. That'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern time, so make sure to stop on by for that. Subscribe over there too so you guys don't miss any of the content that I'm doing on that side of things. But also for rounds 2 through 4, we're going to have prop streams on my channel, showdown streams on the Ship It Nation YouTube channel too. Make sure to stay tuned for all of that throughout the week. It's not quite a signature event, not quite a major, but a sweaty tryhards are never taking weeks off, and that's what you can expect from a channel like this. So on top of that, guys, go ahead, give me your winner down below. If you guys give me the winner this weekend, they are at least 30 to 1 on the major sports books, you guys will win a free month access to my Patreon page. So if you guys haven't already gone ahead and guessed your winner down below, go ahead and do so. And it's going to be on a first come first serve basis. So once the player's taken once, that is 30 to 1 plus, they cannot be taken again. Or if you end up guessing them and you don't check the comments, it's going to be the first guy that ends up getting that credit. Of course, on the Patreon page is where you can find all my analysis. That includes the DFS sheets that you see throughout these videos, as well as everything for showdown and rounds 2 through 4, and the prop stuff that I'm doing on Underdog and Prize Picks. That includes all the prop breakdowns, the stat averages from these golf courses, also weather reports for every single days of action to give you the research you need not only for DFS, but also to attack the prop categories on the sports books too. So go ahead, give me the guess so you guys can enter the sweepstakes there. But best of luck with the giveaway, with all the exposure that you guys are getting to. I hope to see your names towards the top end of some of those GPPs. Let's maybe get an outright cash this week too. That would be kind of nice to get the momentum heading the right way. We've had a lot of close calls over the last few weeks. I mean, Henley ended up 1 shot off the lead. We had St. Burns losing a playoffs a few weeks prior to that. The process is dialed in though. We've had a lot of close calls for a reason. You just got to get somebody over that finish line. Maybe the week is this week for that. It'd be a good one, that's for sure. It'd be a good thing to hit on one of those. So best of luck out there, everyone. And I'll see you guys throughout the rest of the week for all of that content.